Okay, picture this. You've just delivered a completely polished 5-minute presentation. You hit every single talking point, your slide deck looked incredible, and honestly, you're feeling great. And then, the Q&A session begins. Someone in the back of the room asks a question you totally didn't expect, and suddenly that perfect presentation just falls apart into stammering, rambling, or even worse, contradicting what you literally just said. Look, it's a universal nightmare for speakers, but welcome to this explainer, because we're going to fix exactly that. The Q&A absolutely doesn't have to be a trap. It's actually a skill you can prepare for, just like the rest of your talk.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by preparing for the Q&A, learning the 3-step answer, and handling difficult questions. Then we go on the offensive, engaging beyond the Q&A, mastering the handout, and defining your key message.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, preparing for the Q&A.
So the absolute biggest mistake speakers make is thinking their job is completely done the second that final slide clicks off. But preparation isn't just for your presentation. It's absolutely vital for the aftermath. Once you finish building your deck, you need to step back, put yourself completely in your audience's shoes, and ask yourself one really simple question. What would I want to know after hearing this? You might not be able to guess every single question they'll throw at you, but human curiosity, it's surprisingly predictable.
In fact, almost all audience questions are going to fall into one of these 5 predictable categories. First up, clarification. Hey, can you explain what you mean by that? Second, evidence. Where did you actually get that number? Third is objection. Okay, but what about the downsides? Fourth, application. How would this actually work in practice? And finally, extension. What's the long-term plan here? For every single one of these categories, you should absolutely prepare 1 or 2 likely questions in advance and draft up some concise answers. Just jot them right down on the last page of your speaker notes so you can reference them in a flash.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 3-step answer.
Now, what actually happens when you're up there, the lights are glaring, and a wild question comes your way? Well, you need a defensive toolkit to keep your cool. And notice how simple but incredibly powerful this pattern is. When you answer any question, you just follow 3 steps. Step 1, acknowledge the question. Show them you actually heard and understood what they're asking. Step 2, answer directly. Give a clear, concise response, leading with the actual answer before giving any messy details. And step 3, connect back to your key message. Trust me, this structure provides immediate confidence and entirely stops you from rambling.
Now that 3rd step, connecting back to your key message, is so crucial it actually has its own name. It's called the bridge. Think of the bridge as a literal tactical superpower for presenters. It's a rhetorical technique that lets you take any weird conversational detour and gracefully redirect it right back to the main point you actually want your audience to remember. It puts you firmly in control of the room.
Okay, let's say you're pitching a student peer tutoring program, and someone asks, well, what happens if not enough students volunteer? First, you acknowledge it. That's a fair concern. Then, you answer directly with your hard data. 40 students said they'd be interested, and we only need 15. Even if half don't follow through, we still have enough. Finally, you use the bridge. And that's actually another benefit of the program. It gives student tutors leadership experience, which is a real incentive. See that? Acknowledge, answer, bridge. It just flows perfectly.
Which brings us to Section 3, handling difficult questions.
Because let's be real, not every question is going to be a friendly little inquiry about volunteer numbers. We really need to pivot to the 2 hardest moments in any Q&A, when you simply don't know the answer and when someone flat out disagrees with you. So let's tackle that fear of not knowing first. If someone asks a question and you just draw a total blank, the absolute worst thing you can do is guess or just make up an answer. It completely destroys your credibility instantly. Instead, honestly admitting a gap in your knowledge is actually perfectly professional. A simple, I don't have that specific data, but I can follow up with you after the presentation, shows that you are honest, confident, and deeply committed to getting it right.
Now let's contrast 2 approaches to outright disagreement. Imagine someone tells you your peer tutoring idea won't work because students just aren't qualified. The defensive response says, that's not true at all. Have you even looked at the research? Right away, that tone is combative and makes the whole room tense. But the professional response stays totally calm. I understand that concern. Peer tutors aren't replacing teachers. The research from Jefferson High shows measurable improvements. See how tone and evidence change the whole vibe? You acknowledge their point without getting defensive, and you let your data do the heavy lifting.
Real quick, before we leave the Q&A section, we absolutely need to bust a major presentation myth. You have got to drop the filler phrase, "That's a great question." It has become such an automatic, cliché response that it means literally nothing anymore. The audience totally knows you are just stalling for time. If you need a second to think, just take a brief, silent pause. It is vastly more professional than an obvious stall. Just take a breath and jump straight into acknowledging the actual substance of what they asked.
All right, Section 4, engaging beyond the Q&A.
Let's see how all this builds into a bigger strategy, because we are pivoting from playing defense to playing offense now. Engaging your audience doesn't mean you have to sit around and wait until the end of your talk. You can lock in their attention during the actual body of the presentation. Here are 4 highly actionable tactics you can build right into your script. Number 1, ask a question early on. Getting people to actually raise their hands makes the problem feel instantly real to them. 2, use a brief poll. It creates instant, visible evidence right there in the room with you. 3, tell a short 30-second story about a real experience. Believe me, a story is always more memorable than a dry statistic. And 4, invite a prediction. Asking something like, "How much do you think the school would save?" right before you show the final results creates massive curiosity.
Next up, Section 5, mastering the handout.
Let's transition over to what happens when you actually leave the room. A presentation basically vanishes into thin air the moment you stop speaking, right? But a well-crafted handout extends the life of your presentation long after everyone is headed home. However, there is a golden rule for handouts, and you absolutely must follow it. Distribute them after your talk, not before. Look, I know the instinct is to be super helpful and give everyone the materials right as they sit down. Do not do it. If you hand it out early, the audience is just going to start reading ahead. And an audience that is reading is an audience that has completely stopped listening to you.
So when you do finally hand it out at the end, it should look a lot like this model from Maya Chen's tutoring proposal. This right here is the gold standard. Notice how it's a beautifully clean, readable layout. It is so much better than just lazily printing out your slide deck. She puts your key message right at the very top. Then it briefly outlines the problem using just a few stats, explains the solution of free after-school sessions, and critically, it ends with clear next steps. Things like voting at the December meeting, plus her direct contact info. It's a completely standalone document that keeps fighting for her idea even when she isn't in the room.
And finally, Section 6, your key message.
We are going to bring this whole explainer together now by connecting your presentation's core takeaway back to some pretty fundamental communication skills. Everything we've discussed today relies entirely on you knowing exactly what you are trying to say. Think about the fundamental connection here. Distilling a presentation down to one single key message is the exact same intellectual exercise as writing a sharp, arguable thesis statement for an essay. They both have to answer the exact same fundamental question. What is the one thing I want my listener or reader to take away? A really strong key message, just like a great thesis, is never vague. It's specific, it makes a clear claim, and it's backed up by evidence.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful tool to use on your next project, the presentation test. If you're ever sitting there wondering if your idea or your thesis is just too broad or a little too vague, ask yourself, could I build a 5-minute presentation around this? If you feel like you need an entire hour, your idea is way too broad. But if you'd run out of things to say in 60 seconds, it lacks substance. Mastering the discipline of finding that one crystal clear key message won't just make you a fearless presenter during the absolute toughest Q&A, it will make every single idea you ever try to communicate sharper and way more compelling. So, go ahead and test your next big idea. If you can't distill it into 5 minutes, do you truly understand it at all? Think about that for a bit, and I'll see you in the next explainer.